So, how interesting can a bike rack be? Well, turns out pretty interesting. This is the Toaster, an innovative bike rack from a company called AHHA Bikes based in the US. It's a bike rack that folds flat when not in use. You can put it under a sofa, in the back of a pickup truck, in your van, or of course, on the bicycle. In this video, I'm going to talk about the pros and cons of the AHHA Toaster Rack and whether you should get one or not get one. Full disclosure, this isn't a sponsored video. The bike rack is on loan. I'm going to send it back once I'm done with this review. And if you buy one or don't buy one, I have no financial benefit. I just thought it was an interesting product that I'd seen online and had the opportunity to test out for a couple of weeks and wanted to share my opinions. Most of the rack is constructed in aluminum with some steel hardware. The total weight of the rack is about 14 pounds. In its folded dimensions, it measures in at 30 by 32 inches and about 2 inches deep. Definitely a size that would tuck away under most sofas or even like a twin bed, would easily fit in the back of a pickup truck, and you could probably find a place for it in a minivan. The rack has 5 slots to put in 5 bikes. We'll get into that a little bit later, but slots measure out at about 2.79 inches. So this is pretty wide. I kind of feel like maybe the initial design was built for mountain bikes. If you have a wider tire bike, the slots have a better chance at holding up the bike because of the width of the tires. If, however, you have a road bike or say even a gravel bike, they do make these grommets. They basically function as spacers to help take up the slack and better hold up your bike. There's a pink one and a blue one. A pink one is the Giro Pink. So it's made for if you have road bikes with, tires up to 30 millimeter tires. And the blue grommets are if you have a grav bike and it'll accommodate up to 50 millimeter wide tires. I didn't get a chance to use the grommets since those are a fairly new addition. So just putting in our standard gravel bike tires, and it does okay. I can see where the grommets would help holding the bikes in a little bit better, but know that it can mostly work without them, except if you have like a super tiny road bike, but who's still riding those? How does this thing work? It's actually super simple. There's a cutout that acts as a handle, and you simply lift that part up. On the backside or the non-branded side, there's a hook that you flip over to lock it into place. You definitely want to do this to prevent accidental closure. You could, it says it'll pinch your finger. It might do more damage than that. In order to close it, you undo the safety latch and you lift up the hook on the left side of the non-branded side, and that releases the mechanism. I found just to be safe, you actually want to lower the rack holding the grommets and not the handle, because if you lower it with the handles and have your fingers tucked under it, it's going to pinch. That's the operation. It's pretty simple. It's really fast to use. And I think it's actually pretty slick. But how does it work as a bike rack? It's pretty simple. You just slide the wheels in there. Although the rack does have 5 slots, you're likely not going to be able to put 5 bikes on there if you're just using one side. They're just too close together. I found that you have to do some pretty strategic staggering of the bikes to get 2 or 3 bikes on one side. So that means putting one bike in tail first and maybe putting in another bike head first and then a third bike tail first. It also becomes more complicated if you have bikes with wide handlebars, which we do. And also if you have bikes with big flat pedals, which we also do. If you're riding bikes with narrower bars and clipless pedals that tend to be smaller, it's going to be a little bit easier to, stack more bikes on one side, but we were clearly the worst case scenario. Ultimately, however, it runs into similar problems of racks with that design in that you have to stagger them, and if the bikes are too close in size or things are too wide, it can be kind of tricky to get things in and out. If you want to maximize and use all 5 slots, let's say you have 5 bikes that you definitely want to have propped up, you're going to need a space big enough so you can put some bikes in from one side and the other bikes from the other. And again, there has to be some strategic staggering going on. You could slot in some kids' bikes pretty easily just because the size difference is so different from like a larger adult bike. That's why I think this might be an interesting use for a family that's traveling with bikes and doesn't want to just stack bikes by a tree. But in terms of full-size adult bikes, there's some Tetrising going on. Another thing to note is that if you don't have the grommets, the wheels are going to be in at a slight angle. This makes it so that you want the bikes that you put in there to be fairly unladen. So if you have a bike with lots of racks or fenders, it's it's not going to work. All those accoutrements are going to run into the rack, and the wheels themselves don't have deep enough penetration to really prop up a heavy bike. In my opinion, this rack is definitely optimized for racier bikes or lightweight bike setups. It's a slick looking bike rack, but who is this bike rack actually for? First on the list, I think, is if you're a van lifer or like to travel with your bikes, then this is kind of a cool setup. You don't have to lean your bikes on the picnic table or find a tree or against your car. You just pull this out, pop it up, and then you have instant bike parking. In the same vein, if you're a family and let's say you're traveling with 2 adult bikes and a couple of kids' bikes, this is actually a pretty cool solution. Another area where I think a rack like this makes sense is if you're a bike team, let's say you're a cross team or you're doing 24 hours at Old Pueblo. The rack itself has lots of room for team branding, and I think that's something that they do. And in an outdoor space like that, there's plenty of room to utilize both sides of the rack. Another potential user for this rack is, let's say, institutional users. So I'm thinking, people that run an Airbnb, hotels, motels, cafes that want quick pop-up bike rack parking that can be easily torn down and moved and put away when cyclists aren't there. And again, because of all the opportunities for branding on the rack, I think it makes sense for like institutional users. Does it make sense for apartment dwellers? Well, kind of depends on your apartment. In borrowing it, we were hoping that it would better prop up 5 bikes, but experiencing how tight the configuration is and how much room you actually need to have 5 bikes supported, it just takes up a lot of real estate in a small apartment. We found the way that we've been using it the most is up against a wall, propping up 2 bikes. You can get 2 bikes in there easily. 3 bikes can be a bit of a Tetris puzzle, so we find ourselves just using it to hold 2 bikes. And because of the cost of the rack, I know we didn't get to pricing yet, it doesn't make sense for us in a small apartment. There are just far cheaper ways to prop up like a pair of bikes. So let's get to the pros and cons. The first big pro is I think the design is actually really cool. It's pretty innovative. I love how quick and easy it is to set up. The opportunities for branding it or painting it, you can really make it your own. Another big pro, although we're not living in the US at the moment, it is manufactured in the United States. So if that's important to you, then there's added value there. I do think it would make a pretty cool, van life accessory, if you will. If we still had our minivan, we're doing a lot of traveling and carrying multiple bikes, this would be a great way to keep them upright while at camp. In terms of costs, let's get the big one out of the way, and that's going to be the price. As of now, 2024, they're made in the US and they cost about $400. So that's going to be a huge barrier to lots of people. I'm not denying that, but there are things that go into that price. Mostly manufacturing in the US is expensive. There you go. Whether it's worth it for you or you'd rather put something together using 2x4s, I'm sure you've already left a comment below. The other con, probably the more significant one from a usability perspective, is because of the spacing of the grommets, you're going to have to get creative to fully maximize all 5 slots. It will definitely work better with, let's say, lightweight racing bikes that are in general easier to prop up. But if you have like heavier steel bikes or touring bikes or a bike with fender, then this probably isn't the bike rack for you. There's just going to be way more affordable and potentially more functional options for those kinds of bikes. I do think, however, where there is a big opportunity, and I mentioned this earlier in the video, is for the institutional user. I'd love to see something like this pop up at more cafes or lodging properties that cater to an outdoor market. Again, lots of opportunity to have it painted bright colors, have cool branding, and really communicate that your business or your lodging property is bike friendly. Like I mentioned, this video isn't sponsored. We're not keeping the rack. We're not getting paid. If you buy one or don't buy one, it's no skin off our back. We're able to give you this perspective because we're supported by viewers like you. We do very little sponsored videos. We've done 0 paid reviews for the entirety of this channel's existence. If you like that and want to support that, then join us on Patreon or pick up some stickers, shirts. I'm currently rocking the rim brakes or disc brake shirts. I'm going to put that all in the links below. And as always, keep the supple side down.